Ask the Podcast Coach for July 27th, 2019. That's not the right one. I was this close. I was this close. Ask the Podcast Coach for July 27th, 2019.
Let's get ready to podcast.
Hey, it's Saturday morning. There's that music coming in just a shade early today. That means it's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I am, he said, looking for the button, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. And joining me right over there from Nebraska and from Gallup and from Home Gadget Geeks, you can find him at theaverageguy.tv, like that. It's the one and only Jim Collison. Don't be fooled by cheap imitations. How's it going, Jim?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. You got a lot of going on over there. You seem we seem a smidge off this morning.
Yeah. Well, it's we were talking before we hit record. I have a new same studio, different setup. I now have my monitors up off the desk, and I got to tell you, I think I got the bracket for like $40 on Amazon. Best thing I've ever done.
Dual monitor bracket is what you got, right? You got a dual monitor bracket.
Yeah, and then they twist and turn and go upside down and the whole 9 yards. It's actually pretty cool.
I was on Podlords with Jim Harold.
Yes.
And we talked he asked me, like, what's one piece of equipment? Like, you know, and I kind of struggled because I don't know. I'm not going to get the Rodecaster Pro and a mixer. I don't need any of those things. But I think podcasters skimp in the area of monitor space. You know, you're trying to do it on this little tiny laptop, or in your case, the monitors are sitting on the desk. Getting those things on a monitor stand or on a monitor stand, let's say, gives you some you've got new real estate back on your desk. And I think that can be really, really helpful. You know, you can plug them in and you can still take your laptop and plug it in and make that stuff work. But I think sometimes you struggle, you know, we get these little Mac minis or whatever they are, you know, these little 13-inch screens. If you're trying to edit on a 13-inch screen, I mean, your life could not be any worse. So get some monitors. They're super cheap. You bought a new monitor, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I bought this stuff on Black Friday. So it's 7 months in, and it's always been like, I'll get to it. And I was just like, my office has just been really getting messy. And I was like, you know what would help? Let's take this off. And so I did. And it was funny because I thought I would like pull out the bracket, clamp it on my desk. No, it was like, screw this into tab A and to B and apply the adhesive so it doesn't scratch your desk and all this other stuff. So it took the better part of an evening to set up. But man, I got done. I was like, well, number one, you don't realize how dusty your desk is. And a lot of business cards from old podcast movements and things like that I'm like, okay, don't need this. And I now have a stack of about 4 or 5 here Post-it notes that have been, you know, buried under stuff.
They were lost underneath the monitors. I have found, like, I like bringing my USB ports up. So I have a USB hub that I've brought up underneath the monitor. So you can just, if you need access flash drive or, you know, whatever, you can just kind of plug those in there. I've also got some like tablet devices. I'm a gadget guy, so I've got all this equipment that goes nicely underneath it. And so it just gives you some more space to some more real estate to kind of mess with.
It sounds weird, but it's more relaxing because I'm not kind of like cramped in and like, oh, I can't wait, I can't move. Like now, before I was complaining how the Rode Procaster took up half my desk, I could actually put this back on here and still have room now because I've got more room. So it's one of those things. I was like, wow, I didn't think this would make that much of a difference, but it kind of does. I know one of the things I do, like Podcast Movement is coming up here in a couple of weeks, and one of the things I always do when I get ready to leave, like the night before, I will clean the living room and I will definitely clean the kitchen. Why? Because when I walk back into the house, the first thing I don't want to see is dishes but it was like, it's nice to kind of just walk in and go, home sweet home. And so by kind of having a cool working space, it just makes things easier and, you know, that whole 9 yards. So
I think it clears the mind a little bit. And I always feel good. I get this clutter. I've got a clutter area on my desk too. And I'm looking at it right now. There's a whole bunch of things. And it's like, I just need to remove those things and put them away or put them in a drawer or do something with them, get rid of them. And it just kind of helps, I think, in my when I'm podcasting, if my desk is messy, I feel a little off.
Yeah.
And if it's clean, I feel really good. And so I think for some, maybe an inventory or maybe you need to have a desk cleaning day where you kind of clean some stuff off. I've seen some pictures on Facebook of people's studios. And of course, you're not going to post a picture of your studio in a mess on Facebook. So they all look great. I would think most of them don't look that great all the time. So I think it's a good exercise to get into, is just kind of clean some things off. Dave, you've also got some shelf speakers that, when you're doing editing and some of those kinds of things, you have them. Where are they in kind of relation to you on the desk, your speakers? How do you have those placed?
Well, they used to be right on the corners outside of the monitors because the monitors were blocking them because they were, 6 inches lower. And so what I've done now is I have put them on the corners of the desk. Like they're kind of, so I have a much wider stereo separation. And that's actually, to be more honest, that's more for movies that I watch on my desk than podcasting. But I just like the fact that it was like the speaker was always in the way, because a lot of times they'd be moving. I'm like, oh, wait, hold on. I can't see that, button or whatever. So it's nice just to have them out of the way. And I'm actually tempted now, and it's one of those gear acquisition things, I'm like, I have enough room now. I can actually get little baby actual studio monitors that are flat, rated. And I was like, you know what? But it's probably 50-50. I watch a lot of movies here while I'm working. I multitask here. So I'll have, like I just watched Captain Marvel, which I still kind of like, okay, I get it now. But I was watching her, and I was, half writing a book, half doing this and doing follow-ups and things like that. So
you can also mount those speakers up out of the way, by the way. Speakers are one of those kinds of things. They don't have to be directly in front of you, or even positioned for what we do for podcasting, maybe editing music and some things that's different. But you could move those up for some folks in their studio. You could move those up and have them more like wall mounted, coming down at you. That's a pretty good way to do it, to get them completely off the desk.
Yeah, I've seen these mounts that you somehow connect to your monitor, and they'll hang right on like you'd have one on the right edge of the monitor, one on the left edge. So there's all sorts of different ways. Carrie in the chat room, oh boy, this is always fun. We just bought a house that was under renovation and stuff is everywhere. Yeah, there's nothing more fun than moving. I know, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on his name, Chris from I Am Salt Lake, just had a little baby, and now they're moving. And, it was like, what's the best part of moving? And somebody put unpacking 6 years later.
You got to become a minimalist when you move, just start throwing stuff out and think like, okay, I'm going to move as little as possible. I'm dreading moving from this place. I mean, behind me are some CDs from like the 90s, and you're like, well, some of it's nostalgia. Like I have a copy of Windows Vista, right?
Nice.
I'm a tech guy, right? That's what I do. But, do I actually need that? No. I'm put it in a box and just put it in storage or something. I don't know. Throw it away. Yeah. You hate to get rid of nostalgia. There's a lot of things I got rid of 20 years ago that I wish I still had. And so now I'm kind of thinking, well, there's some things I want to keep.
Yeah. You're like, do I really need this, Spin Doctor CD? Yes, you do. I was actually listening to the Spin Doctors yesterday. I was like, forgot about these guys. But one thing that kind of ties in with your space, I went up, there's a company in Beechwood, Ohio called Audiomute, I guess is how you pronounce it. It's AUDI Mute. And it's a soundproofing company. And it was amazing because what they do is they have, how you make your basic baffle. It's a frame, and then you have some sort of air kind of cushion thingy in the middle of it, and then you have fabric over it. Well, now they're printing on fabric that was like ridiculously like detailed. I could not believe how great it looked. And then they said, well, this is like our big, jumbo deluxe kind of version. But then they had this other one, and now they have the ability. It's like he handed me what looked like a piece of wood. He handed me a piece of wood, and I went, you go to grab it, and then it was like my hand just went through the roof because it was a piece of foam that looked like wood. So their whole thing is not just soundproofing, because who just wants a checkered board of, egg crates on your wall? And it was really cool. And Pat Flynn actually somehow found these guys. He's been doing videos on his YouTube. And Pat actually he took that, that black, weird little cone shaped stuff, put it on a panel the same size as the panel from Audiomute, and compared the two. And it was pretty impressive. And what's cool about this is, I know, Jim, we get excited when we see things like the Rodecaster and they realize that there's a market in podcasting. And so he showed me, like, there was this cool thing, like I've talked about putting hooks in your ceiling and hanging up a moving blanket. Well, what if you live in an apartment and you can't put ceilings you can't put ceilings in your hooks? I hate when you can't put ceilings in your hooks.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
But it's this thing. It's like a little portable, like 3-walled booth. And I was like, dude, I'm like, and then I was like, well, like, I'm ready to buy one. Where? And he's like, yeah, it's not on the website yet. This is like a new line that we're coming out with. So they're going to be at Podcast Movement.
Oh, cool.
But I was like, I said, oh yeah. I said the biggest thing you'll get at Podcast Movement is A, you'll get to meet your target audience, and B, you'll probably get a lot more ideas where they'll go, ooh, this is cool, but does it do this? And so they're really excited about it. So I was just happy to have another company, like, seeing podcasters is like, hey, we could probably tap into that. And how I got involved was I do the Northeast Ohio Podcasters Meetup. And again, this is rarely over 10 people. It's usually more like 6. And one of the guys knows the guy that runs Audiomute. He goes, do you know, like, Kevin from Audiomute? And I'm like, no. He goes, oh, we should hook it up and have you do a tour. And so I went up Wednesday night. So that's another kind of company jumping in that, not for everybody. It's not the $7,000 you're going to buy to build an audio booth in your, have you ever seen those where it's actually a booth? And I'm like, it's like somewhere between $7,000 and $11,000. It's like $300-$400 if you're going to get a couple panels. But if you're for like the serious podcaster who is sitting there with a hardwood floor and no carpet and things like that,
and you can really hear it when you've gotten a hold of somebody and they're in a hard space, a big open hard space. Man, no matter how good their microphone is, you still kind of hear that distance in their voice. You're like, are you, I get this all the time. I'm like, are you in a big open room that has no soft spaces at all? I'm like, can you drag a couch in there or something? Like we just need something to kind of absorb a little bit of the sound that's going on.
Do you have a bookcase you can just drag in there for the? I
know, grind it across. It would be cool. I mean, that foam, if they could really print anything on there, you could get some really interesting backdrops with that. And if you need it in there, oftentimes the backdrop is the one area that gets left because that's what people see. Well, but if you can make that look good,
the one thing he made that I was like, it was this huge, square, green screen colored, but it was and I was like, that is, I'm like, I just bought one. I could see that putting behind me, and I was like, that's really cool. So, hey, if by chance you are listening on Spreaker, we're at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. And if you have any questions, you can come on over to askthepodcastcoach.com/live. Like I just said, if you want to jump in, it's askthepodcastcoach.com/join. But it was a really, really fun time, good place. And my favorite, I said, you need to take that to Podcast Movement because they can make any kind of shape out of this foam stuff. Yeah. And they made one that was it was like sound baffling, but it was a stormtrooper. And I go, you take that to Podcast Movement. I said, you'll have people clawing their eyes out to take that home. I said, I'm telling you, I said, there are a lot of Star Wars nerds and sci-fi peeps and things like that. So
yeah, for sure. That's super cool.
This should be fun. We did have a question that got sent in from our buddy Troy Heinrichs from the Blacklist Exposed. And except that's not the question I clicked on. Where did I just had it. All right. Well, what Troy was asking is he uses PowerPress and he's moving to a new website. And he said, I know I can import and export out of, in PowerPress to basically, import and export the, what am I thinking of? The posts. That's a piece of cake. Mm-hmm. And here I found this thing. I know you can move blog posts from one WordPress site to another through export and import functions fairly easily. But what happens when you use PowerPress on one site and no longer using PowerPress on the new site in favor of saying the Libsyn feed? In fact, are there any plugin compatibility things people should worry about during the migration, or GUID confusion.
Mm.
So we are going, you know how we usually have Jim get his geek on? We're going to get our geek on now with podcasting. What a GUID is, it's a string of numbers and stuff, letters that identifies each episode. And that's why if I just went from PowerPress and then I manually put in all my stuff in Libsyn and just did a redirect. So I said, hey, go to, look at the Libsyn thing. Everybody would download all those shows again because they look like new shows. The GUID, the identifying number, would be different. So the first thing you want to do is email Libsyn support if you're moving to Libsyn, because what we will do is we will try to clone your PowerPress site. Now, if everything's already in there, all we're really doing is we're syncing the GUIDs. And then there's a plugin for WordPress called Redirection, very creatively named. And you install it and you say, look, when somebody goes to this, and this would be your old feed. So it's, whatever, your website.com/podcast/feed, whatever. And then you say, and when somebody goes to that, go to, and then you put in your Libsyn feed. Now, the thing that's interesting about this is per Apple, they say you need to put in this tag that says, this is a new feed. This is new. And what happens then is when somebody fires up let's say they're using the Apple Podcast app, they fire it up, it looks at your PowerPress feed. PowerPress says, hey, we moved. We're over there at Libsyn. So the app goes over to Libsyn, looks at their feed and says, oh, wow, this is new. And it updates the app so that the next time they fire it up, it looks at, Libsyn, which is cool. But what I don't know is there are some hosts that you move to that there's no way to put in the new feed tag. And I've had people say, no, the 301 will take care of it. The 301 is the redirect. And I just know if Apple is saying, no, you need to put this code into the new feed, I'm like, there's got to be a reason for that. So, but that's how you do it. The big thing is that you have to be absolutely number one. So step one, clone your feed so that it doesn't look any different when you change it. Step two, when you redirect your feed, don't be doing anything else. Because if I accidentally have a typo and I say, when somebody goes to my original feed, go to this one with a typo, your entire audience just went to the feed with a typo and you can't get them back unless you somehow buy the domain with a typo and redirect them back. So that's why I typically don't like talking about this subject, because you can really shoot yourself in the foot. My other advice would be don't use your webmaster for this if they don't know what a podcast is.
Yeah, get some help.
Yeah,
get some help too. Maybe hire Dave to do it.
But Jim, I will let you take this question from the chat room. It says, how many episodes a new podcast should have recorded before being published? I have 3. Can I start on Podbean?
Yeah, you have 3. You can start with 1.
You can start with 1. Yeah, you need 1 episode to go live in Apple Podcasts. Yeah. And some people like to have a bunch in the can. I just interviewed a guy last night. He had 12 in the can. And he said, why? Because I knew life was going to happen. And that way he was working on the next 12 as the first 12 are going out. Yeah. And I didn't get a chance to ask him, but I wanted to say, well, what happens if on like episode 5, you find out that you have a segment in your show that's driving your audience nuts? They then have 7 more episodes with that. So
it's a good learning experience. Those early ones. I mean, I don't think you lose either way if you've got them in advance and you need to make a change. If you don't need to make a change, you're ahead of the game. So I think either way, you're fine on that. If you want to build up a bunch of episodes and have them, I think that can work. If you want to release them all at once, I think that can work. It depends on how you market that. There was some discussion somewhere in one of the groups about, I just interviewed this really important person. Do I want to put them in with the 3 or 5 other ones that I'm blasting out all at the same time? And it's kind of, I don't know. What do you think's best for that guest in that interview? And should they have their own week or their own day or their own whatever, right? I think we have to remember in this, like even on launch, if we're doing our job right, launch is a very small percentage of our listeners for the future. Very, very small. And so sometimes I think we act like the launch is gonna be the primary amount of listeners, and it's just they're not. They're later on, especially the early episodes 1 through 10. Most people are going to come back and listen to those in a back catalog status anyway. So it doesn't don't worry about it. If you got them ready, you want to put them out, put them out. Do it according to your launch plan. So if you got a big blast going on, you got a bunch of people coming in, you want to get a bunch of stuff out there, do it. If you want to release one, the next week release the other. You got tweets going out. You got people helping you. You can do it that way too. So I don't think there's a right way. The right way is just to get it out there and don't stop thinking about it.
Exactly. Yeah. My little analogy is saying, that a big launch will lead to podcast success is like saying having a big wedding will lead to wedding bliss. And it's like, no, really, the wedding is really where this, from that point forward is where the work really starts. And just getting the podcast launched, just writing a book, all that stuff, the creating the content, you will find out later, is the easy part. Mm-hmm. It's getting people to listen is the fun part. We got another question here from the chat room. And again,
this is Fred, by the way, a bridge too far. This is Fred.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
We're at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. How accurate and relevant is the episode and blog post to teach a podcaster how to record on Skype? Now that Microsoft has ruined it for me. How accurate is the episode?
In other words, somebody wrote a blog post about teaching people how to use Skype for that. And Skype's got its challenge, just like all the rest of them do. Like, I have yet to hear of any one service where it's perfect. They all have. Last week I was listening to Todd and Rob on a new media show, and they had tried to use Squadcast, and they thought they were going to broadcast with Squadcast. And It's not a broadcasting thing, guys. It's a little embarrassing when you're in the podcast industry and you don't know that. But that being said, there's no one of these. Skype certainly has its issues. I know a lot of podcasters that use Skype full time, and it works fine for them. Yeah,
I am not of the. I know some people like throw open their mouth just a little bit when they hear the word Skype. I'm not one of those. I mean, I still use Squadcast, but I never, And if somebody turned into Bugs Bunny on Poison in the middle of a Skype call, I would just go, "Can you say that again?" That kind of got a little weird. So, So
what would you think? To Fred's question, what would you think? I would think, well, this is what they're choosing to do, and this is how they're choosing. Skype still works, and there's other ways to do it, but
the last time I went in, it was kind of a who moved my cheese moment where you're like, wait, where's the settings? Oh, it's over here. So it's really not that much different. I don't use the recording in Skype. It was just a matter of getting used to the interface, and all you really need to do in Skype is figure out how to tell it, use this microphone, use these headphones, and turn off the automatically adjust volume level. But
yeah, I'm not a fan of Skype, just to be 100% honest. That's not where I would go anymore. If I saw a podcaster recommend it, well, if it's working for them, that works. But I think there's plenty of other great options. This StreamYard, Dave, has been amazing. Like, we've been using this now for 4, 5, 6 weeks at Gallup. And I just can't tell you how easy it is to get connected, and the quality, and it goes right to YouTube. And I mean, there's some things coming up with it as well. And you can go to Facebook, and I mean, whatever these guys and gals, ladies, are doing, StreamYard, they're doing a pretty good job. I'd love to see some additional screen options come up where we can, like, you could make me big and you small. You can't do that today. You can only make.
I have this ginormous. Let's go widescreen. There we go.
Yeah. So no, that's fine. But it's Sarah just said you don't need to be big. So this is I think this is a great option. But Fred, I get it. I get what you're saying. Like, do you listen to that podcast or what? Over a thing like Skype, I don't think that's to ignore it if you don't like it, and move on.
Yeah, and it's hard when you make a blog post about technology. I made a video on my YouTube channel about how to change the categories in Libsyn and PowerPress, and 3 years from now, that's going to be complete moot. That's why a lot of people are shooting themselves in the foot, because there's some very popular videos on how to make a podcast from 2012 that are just horrible advice now. But I help them every day go, hey, this is what I did. Mm-hmm. And right now, I think hands down, the one that I just go, oh, is when somebody takes whatever media host you have, whether it be Libsyn or Blueberry or whoever, and you try to make, you upload 5 podcasts to one account, and then you use PowerPress to switch them out. And then later when you want to switch, you're like, it's just a big old mess. So
Mathematica, the guy who asked the question earlier, I keep postponing my recordings. But I tell myself I have to record some more. It's a contradiction. I'm just afraid of going live. Well, the real issue is just go live. Like,
Go live.
don't think about it. Don't just one day go in and click the button like automatically and get that thing out there. You'd be surprised the relief and the like, oh, it's finally that stress is off my back, right? Just go live. Stop delaying it.
I don't know if you have the capability of joining us live. I would love to know what's holding you back from putting out that first episode, because it's weird, because some people are worried.
It's embarrassment, Dave. I mean, it's like, I don't want to get that out there. And then people are like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. People don't realize this. When you first start, nobody's listening. It's a handful of people. It's 20 people or less. So unless you really,
but I had a friend when I first started podcasting. I'd say first. I've been doing it for a year or two, and he found me, a work friend, and he was like, "Oh, you make these tech podcasts too?" So I got to listen to this. So he comes back to me later in the day and he goes, AverageGuy.tv studios, really? Because I say that in my intro. I'm Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios. He goes, really? Now he knows me, right? And it was one of those kind of little embarrassing moments where you kind of think, well, okay. I mean, yeah, I say that it's just the room down here where I do this at, but you run that risk. And I think this is why people don't click, deploy, upload, whatever, because they're afraid of the people around them now can listen to this. And they're going to be like, again, what are you doing? I think you have to get past it. There's going to be some people who are going to be like, you just got to get past it. You just be like, hey, this is my thing. I enjoy doing this, sorry, but you have to get past that. Yeah.
The question I always like to ask is, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah.
Like, what's the worst, A, you might actually help somebody. B, you might actually trigger some dopamine in your brain, which will make you feel good because you help somebody. There's a lot of things that I was asking, instead of asking what could go wrong, what could go right. We get kind of hung up on that, and it's you don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great. And I think that's a Zig Ziglar line, and
it's a good one.
You got to throw it out there, because we all start from someplace. Michael Delaney is playing with Pretty Links. Says, what's the difference between 307, 302, and 301 is a permanent. I have no idea the difference between what a 30. Do you know, Jim?
I think one's temporary. It's it's what it's telling. So the crawler, as the crawlers are coming in, mostly Google. I mean, Bing does the same thing, but these crawlers are coming in. It's telling them, hey, when you file this is a 301. This is a permanent thing. So whatever you had for this in the past, forget. It's gone. Temporary is, hey, we've just moved this over here, and that's exactly what it means. It's just temporary. And so it keeps the old link in Google.
So to give you an example, askthepodcastcoach.com/live, I think is a 302. Why? Because I change it on occasion.
Yeah.
And even if it is a 301, if somebody hits that, it's still going to go wherever I have that, but it's more of a Google thing. And I'm sure if you just Google 302 versus 307 redirect, Uncle Google will give you an answer for that. But that's one I don't worry about. I just, I want the one that's temporary. Andreas, we're talking Skype here. He says, I push out my Mac line out into a direct box and then go into my interface, and it sounds fantastic. He's talking about, where does Skype go? Here he goes. Yeah. And I use Ecamm Skype recorder as a backup. Because it's jittery, I just ask for a direct internet connection or turn off the video. Yep. It's one of those things that I once interviewed a guy in Africa he interviewed me on Skype, and he just said, look, I live in Africa. We have horrible internet. I'm probably going to drop the call about 6 or 7 times. He goes, don't worry about it. I'll call you right back. And sure enough, I'd be talking, and in the middle of an answer, it would just go bloop, bloop, bloop. And I'm like, and he called me back. He goes, okay, we're just going to start from that question and continue on. And we'd get through about 3 questions or answers. And then in the middle of an answer, he'd drop off, and he'd like, okay, we're going to pick up here. And it was weird, and it was different, but that was the worst case of Skype that I've ever seen. But,
they all have their problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. They all have their problems. Mathematica says he works in radio. Working in radio has been a dream in his life. I'm a mathematician starting a radio like podcast and education. I'm afraid, and this is the important line as we're talking about this. I'm afraid people will think I'm ridiculous. right?
No.
And that is, but that's a Dave. That's a we're all afraid of that, right? That's kind of we're all afraid someone's going to laugh at us, or if someone's like, who the heck are you? And what makes you think you can be an authority on these kinds of things? And that fear of being, called this is ridiculous. Yeah, it's out there. And it's probably going to happen. Like the average guy.tv studios, really? Like it's going to even your friends are going to do this to you. So, but you have to get past it.
Well, yeah, there's a certain gesture you can do those people that involves one of your fingers. I'll put it this way.
Keep it clean, Dave. Keep it clean.
I'm doing a session at Podcast Movement called Does Starting a Podcast Make You Want to Wet Your Pants? That's the title of it. And I'm going to go over, and there's a part of it, the beginning of it, that is like no other session I've ever done. It is hyper interactive. We're going to be throwing paper around and all sorts of stuff. And then it's kind of a poll. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And this is either going to be like one of the best sessions ever, or it's going to blow up in my face. And there's only one way to know. But I've seen it. I'm borrowing this idea from somebody else. I saw it in a documentary, and I'm like, oh, that so worked. And I'm like, I'm bringing that into podcasting, but I don't know, I'm in a fireside chat. I don't know what a fireside chat is. If it's 6 people, I'm going to like, well, this isn't going to work, but there's only one way to do. And if it blows up, then I go, okay, well, I still think it would work. Let's go back and tweak it. And maybe if I did this with it differently, maybe if I had set up an app where people could have voted on their app instead of doing this weird thing where people stand up. You don't really know until you start. And again, well, where's I don't have Ryan. Yes, I can.
No one will punch you in the face.
Nobody's going to punch you in the face. So, Dane, go ahead.
Before we run that risk every week, you and I, because it's not possible for the two of us to be the experts in everything. And yet the name of the show asks the podcast coach. Let's go back to this 301, 302, 307 redirect question. Neither one of us really know the deep technical details around it and why it's, so people ask that, we run the risk of like, God, you get done with that question, you're like, man, these guys don't freaking know anything. Like they don't even know the difference between a 301 and a 307. I mean, come on. Now, most people don't, but that one person who does, or the 5 people super technical that are out there who really do know that, are like, God, these guys are losers. Like they don't know anything. You run that risk by putting yourself out there. Dave, if we quit just because we didn't know the answers to the questions, we'd have been done a long time ago, right?
Episode 6, and we're done.
We're good. And we're out. Well, but that's not the point of this. Like the point is we enjoy the community, that we do have some things to say. This is a crowdsourced podcast, and it works. People keep coming on Saturday mornings, and hundreds of people download it to listen to it later. It works. You just do it because that's what you do. You stop being afraid and just push it out there.
And speaking of the redirects, and this is why I love the chat room.
Yeah.
Daniel J. Lewis from the Audacity to Podcast. I said, hopefully Daniel's in the chat room.
Well, he's probably got a post about it somewhere.
Yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah.
It probably does. He goes, there's a deep technical difference between a 302 and a 307. Generally, use a 307 if you need a temporary redirect. There you go. That's what we're looking for. Bottom line, use the 307.
Yeah.
So, but it gets tricky. It's
Uncle Google does have some great information about that out there. I Googled it, and there's a whole bunch of info. So if you want to get deeper than that, basically if you're trying to change the link permanently, use the permanent one. If you're trying to change it temporary, use the temporary one. There you go.
Yeah. And he says, my idea is to burn down the standard way on talking about science.
Yeah.
So do that. And now here's the thing. Some people that are used to science, where people talk like this, and they have, today we're going to talk about science and molecules and things like that. Those people, and then you come in and go, all right, today we're talking about molecules. Check this out. It's a quiz show where you guess the molecule, it's the periodic table, square, whatever. It's different. Some people are going to go, gee, I'm not used to having my science that way. And other people are going to go, finally, somebody took science and made it not boring, so.
Don't be boring.
Well, and I think we have to remember, anytime you're going to do something new, especially if you're going against an established norm. And I love the scientific community, but they can be some of the most staunch, this is the way it's been done, we're not changing until you prove it. I mean, if you go back into history, the scientific community is the slowest community to move on anything. And man, once people get their mindset on things, you better be able to prove it. And so you're probably going to, if you're trying to do things differently, you're probably going to come up against resistance. You got to be able to survive it. Like, you got to be able to say, nope, I really believe this is the truth, and this is what I'm going to be saying and what I'm going to be doing. And you kind of have to stand and you have to keep going when everyone is saying, look, no one embraced Darwin when he wrote his, I shouldn't say no one, but very few embraced this idea of evolution when he began, when he put out the Origins book. And he, today we're like, well, duh. Well, it wasn't duh then.
Yeah.
Like, it was people fought him, and the church went after him hard, right? And so I think if you're going to do a podcast where you're going to go against the norm, okay, be ready for a fight. You're probably gonna have people who say, no. Howard Stern is a great example. When he started doing his shock jock stuff, people were like, oh, I don't know.
Or just plain old Rosie O'Donnell. The interview that's coming out either Monday or the following Monday with and now I lost the book, Kristen Meinsner. So you want to start a podcast? And she talks about that. And I said, how do you inject yourself into a podcast that's like sports or whatever? She goes, well, you have to share an opinion. And she goes, and by sharing an opinion, people get to know you and they get to be able to predict your opinion. And she goes, and some people are going to like that opinion and some people aren't. And if you're worried about being judged, guess what? You ready for this, Jim? This is crazy talk. This is crazy talk. The other night I could not find my shoes and I went to the grocery store and I was wearing Crocs and socks. Crocs and socks. I know, it's crazy. But I wore socks with Crocs, and I'm sure there was somebody at the grocery store going, is he wearing socks with his Crocs? I'm like, oh. So you're being judged everywhere you go.
I'm judging you right now.
Yeah, that's it. So it's, you just get used to it. And instead of thinking about all the negative, think about the positive. Think about the one person that finds your science podcast and goes, oh man, I've been waiting this for the longest time. Finally, somebody got it right. Because there are a lot of podcasts that I know that start because they're screaming at their dashboard. Because they're like, well, I listen, like Jim Harold said, he was listening to me and Daniel and Ray, and he's like, but there were still things that he wanted to talk about that podcasts about podcasting weren't. So he started Podlords. So yeah.
Good show, by the way. I was on that episode 13. I should just pimp it because he was so nice to have.
Oh,
and
he's a
you
great
were
guy.
on that. You've been on that too, right?
Episode 1. Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So 1, and I was lucky 13. Thanks, Jim. I
go.
appreciate that.
Well, he lives like right up the street. He's like 40 minutes north of me. So I actually was in his studio. So awesome. He's got all sorts of like vintage radio stuff, and then he's just got a whole slew of old TV stuff on DVD. So
it's a great example of what Jim's doing, though, that there's plenty of podcasts about podcasting. Some of them are fading, by the way, but there's plenty of those out there. But Jim's like, screw it. There's things I want to do, and I'm going to lean into this space. And then Dave, some of it for you and I, we're going to outlive everybody else. This is the thing. Like, you and I, we're just going to keep doing this. Everybody else is going to get tired. And because we have a sustainable model and we love doing this, I don't know about you. I don't have thoughts of like, maybe Saturday mornings, like maybe it's over, even though we say we don't have that much to talk about, we always find a full hour and a half of things to talk about every single Saturday.
Yeah. How do you grow your podcast? Don't quit.
Yeah. Outlive everybody else. Continue to be out there longer than anybody else. That does require you get on the microphone and you do talk on a regular basis, whatever that regular basis is. But 407 episodes of Home Gadget Geeks. You have 600 and what are you on with School of Podcasting?
680, I think, is the next one.
So we're coming up on 700 weekly. This isn't daily. This is weekly episodes of that. We're in our seventh season of Called the Coach at Gallup. How do you do it? You just keep doing it. Like, you show up and keep recording. And I don't even think sometimes, people are like, I run out of stuff to talk about. Well, okay, maybe. Or have you? Or is there more of things for you to learn so you can, can talk about it? Yeah. No, right on.
Yeah, we're at 261. This is episode 261 of Ask the Podcast Coach. So
yeah. I don't
Fred
think we're slowing down.
No, Fred has asked, any streaming systems available for live sessions at Podcast Movement? Just the same crappy Wi-Fi that every other, event has. I know usually what I do, I've tried in my hotel to go live, and sometimes it's okay, but I would not count on it,
Don't do it. Like, yeah. I think that ship sailed a little bit of streaming live from conferences now. Yeah. It's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, it was cool when we first could do it. I thought it was pretty cool. Today, I'm like, no, I'm actually gonna not do anything because I'm there for the conference. Like, I'm not there to podcast. I'm there for the conference. Could there be some live streaming options? Yeah, and there might be. But if you're going to Podcast Movement, like, plug in. There's people. Hey, there's people around you to talk to. You don't have to podcast. There's live people around you that you could spend time with. So I'd encourage you to do that.
I will probably record videos of people.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, to post later. But
no, I get it.
And Jim says he is going to stop podcasting when you pry the mic from his cold dead hands. So yeah, I mean, that's my favorite line. My line in the Messengers documentary is they asked me, when do you think you'll stop podcasting? I go, the day my ex-wife asked me that. She goes, when are you going to stop podcasting? I go, the day after I die. I go, that's it. I can see me 96 years old. Welcome to building a better Dave. I'll be going on. So it'll be fun. And yeah, as far as I know, the only alternative is a virtual ticket. The reason for that is when people stream live, it's if I can see it, if I can hear it, I can steal it. So that's why it's not going to go live, because all I got to do is go, like, let's say they said, hey, we're streaming the whole thing live on, whatever, and then buy the virtual ticket to get your copy of it. Well, there are enough free video recorders that you just, like I have Camtasia. I can go Camtasia, record the screen, record the audio of the system, and I've got my own copy for free. I do that on a regular basis from people that will go, hey, I'm doing this, it's the replay of the webinar, how to turn, dog poop into $1 million. I'm like, oh, I got to watch this. And then I'll record it because it's only available for 3 days. And I'm like, not if I record it. And then I'll take it and rip the audio out of it and throw it into Overcast. So now, which goes again back to the point of people either buy with money or with time. So it takes a lot of time to capture that. But I don't know any event that does any kind of live streaming.
I wish there was a way. We get this with our own summit at Gallup. We do every summer, we do a big summit, and a couple 1,500 people come out and join us. I know, what is it, 3,000 or 4,000 at Podcast Movement? Is that what we're anticipating? 4,000 or 5,000, something like that. I do wish, in Fred's case, he's not, health wise,
right?
It's tough to travel. As a conference organizer, to make this thing work, you have to have people who come and buy tickets. And if you make the thing too easy to stay home, you'll get some of those bodies who should be there, like me, who stay home. And then guess what? It doesn't work anymore. The finances don't work when you can't get that many people there anymore. Part of making those things work is live. I wish we could figure out a way, Dave, to make it work both ways, where you could, the virtual ticket, so to speak, or the live ticket would not take away from people actually coming, or a way to make that equitable, or a way to make it work financially. That's the problem. It just doesn't work financially. And we hear this. I hear this from people because I have a global audience at Gallup, and they're like, I can't make it from Austria, or I can't make it from South Africa because the foreign exchange rate, the money exchange rate's so poor. It's just too expensive. And I get that. I just wish, but the second I make that conference available online or available to watch, all of a sudden my live numbers just plummet. And it just doesn't work financially. So I wish there was some way to do this where both people could attend live and attend virtually, and it would work financially. In most cases, it just doesn't work financially.
I wish I could remember the podcast I was listening to. They interviewed Jared Easley, and he was talking about the history of Podcast Movement. The second year they went gangbusters, because the first year they raised money via some sort of Kickstarter or whatever, and they got like 3 times their plan. The second year they went gangbusters, and everybody's like, this was one of the best conferences ever. And this is after they worked on it. They both still had day jobs, but they worked on it for a whole year. they finally did the books. They lost 40 grand
Ooh.
on year 2 of Podcast Movement. And I was like, that's where people go, we can, it's a lot of money. My favorite was when I was the guy for the New Media Expo. And I said, we need one more chair. And it cost us $300 to have one guy move a chair over. And that's just Vegas. That's why Vegas it's just ridiculous, because you got to deal with that. But who I hope to see at Podcast Movement?
Some of our awesome supporters, maybe?
Some of our awesome supporters. And we are talking about awesome people like Greg over at debtshepherd.com, where he teaches financial wellness. Glenn the Geek Hebert. I don't know if Glenn's going to be there. HorseRadioNetwork.com. I would assume.
I
know he's
so.
always at PodFest. Josh Rivers over at podcastingexperiments.com. Max Trescott at aviationnewstalk.com. Shane at spybrary.com. Not only a great podcast, but also a great maker of what do you call these things? A coaster. He said, holding it up. As well as Carrie, who's in the chat room. You can find her at keywestperspective.com/podcast. That's the Key West Perspective, a podcast about island life and the people who live it. My buddy Ronsley at Amplify Media Group. Find him at mustamplify.com. Carl White, you can find him Life in the Carolinas podcast.com. And Kim Craggy at Toastmasters101.net. If you want to get into Toastmasters, that will get you going. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, by the way, thank you to Jim Harrell, because he is now a new patron. We will be back to having a meetup. What do you want to call it? An online private Q&A in the for the patrons. So nice. we went under 300. Jim pledged $5. That put us back over. So I'll be scheduling that a little later on. But yeah, so
you should invite me to those.
Yeah, well, you should get the same email that you're a patron. You should get the thing.
You're probably right.
Oh my goodness, it's in there.
You could come, Jim, if you want. You could come.
Absolutely.
No, it's a little bit more of my own. That was I'd be almost sarcastic. That's a little my own. Like, hey, I should come to those. I don't do it on purpose. I just haven't been paying attention.
Yeah. Another chat here from Mathematica here. I love Ask the Podcast Coach. Thank you. Don't you ever lose track of how important you can be to your audience. Mm-hmm. I'm in Brazil and you've just unblocked me. Good. That's exactly.
Yeah. Get it done.
That's really what we're here for. Because there are people always say, why do you do Ask the Podcast Coach? They go, well, isn't it like just free podcast consulting? And I go, yeah. And they go, well, aren't you losing money? And I go, no, because the people that come here in many cases, don't have the budget. They've got kids and families and things like that. And they can't do one-on-one consulting or things like that. So,
I think it's more valuable than you think it is, Dave.
Yeah.
By the way, Podcast Movement, we're not going to do a live podcast because we're going to be there live. So just come talk to us. Like you don't have to listen to a podcast. If you're there, just come listen to us. And then the show after Podcast Movement, are we going to do one that Saturday? When are you getting back from? I get back late Friday night. When do you get back from?
When's the last day of Podcast Movement?
It's Friday.
So I'll be getting back Saturday. I always leave. I always get the day. I always arrive the day before.
Next day, the day after. No
red eye.
Code. Yeah. Well, I get in like at midnight or something that night.
When is Podcast Movement?
12th through the 16th.
Okay, yeah. So I know. I'm like, is it next weekend?
Tuesday through Friday, I think is what it is. Yeah. Yeah, I do. It's coming up fast. Like July is a weird month because you kind of stop keeping track. It's summer and some things are going on, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Hey, it's September," and you're like, well, "When did that happen?"
That's it. I mean, when we started today, I was like, "Wow, July's like done.
It's over. It's over." Last Saturday in July.
Yeah, and it's what's weird is we went from these record highs in Ohio to like it was down 60 degrees last night, which was great. I loved it, but it's like. All right, we're starting to get cool already again. I'm like, I'm sure it's just a fluke.
No, it's coming. It's 91 here today, and that's coming your way. So it'll. I think it'll be hot again before all is said and done.
Yeah. We did have. I want to put this in the chat room. It's an article by our good friends at Magaphone, who are the people that had that article about. But I wanted. They said here. It's all about how long your podcast should be. And their thing was saying that podcasts are getting shorter and they had all sorts of things. But here's the thing that I was like, well, that kind of blows your whole theory. the paragraph starts off using the number of Apple podcast ratings as a measure of success. And I just went, okay, that's where sorry, that's not a measurement of success. We can see that most successful shows group around the 30 to 7 minute range. We can also see that the serialized podcasts tend to group in the 15 to 50 minute range. That's a wide range. While episodic shows have a bit more variance. For example, the vast majority of podcasts over 60 minutes are episodic talk shows. Despite the difference, both the most successful serialized and the most successful episodic shows are still in the 30 to 7 minute range, 70 minute range, to which I go, 30 to 70 minutes is about every podcast I listen to. I think the only thing I listen to that's short is Emily, the story behind podcast, which happened to be wearing the shirt.
Boom.
So,
and the book is right there.
There it is.
Right there.
Yeah. To me, I asked, when Kristen was on my episode, again, that's coming out in a week or two, and she was a big fan of 20 minutes. And I go, is that because of the average length? And she goes, no. She goes, I think the longer your show is, the better your content has to be to hold people's attention. And I went, that's a good point. And she goes, I'm not saying it has to be 20 minutes. I'm just saying, and it was kind of, again, she kind of backed her way into, it needs to be as long as it needs to be.
Right.
But she said, I think most people can hold people's attentions for 20 minutes if they're trying to do a quote long show, because 20 minutes is still double what you're going to get on Jimmy Fallon and, Jimmy Kimmel and all the other typical interviews. Or, I always laugh when I see there's a movie out, so it'll be like, okay, here's an interview with, what's Iron Man's name? Morton Downey Jr., something Downey Jr.
Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah. Morton Downey is a whole other character.
Is that the Salt guy?
No, Morton Downey was like a Jerry Springer. Wasn't he a guy who used to be on late night? Okay. Anyway, but Robert Downey Jr., let's say he's in a movie and you'll see like on some website, Robert Downey Jr. interviewed about his new role in such and such movie. And you go and it's literally 2 questions and they're done. And then it's like, roll the clip. So that's I think the advantage of a podcast is that's why Conan is doing a podcast. He's having a blast. At least he says he is, because he's not doing a 4-minute interview. So,
well, I think what they're doing more of is they're doing longer interviews. So, but they do a segment that makes TV, and then the other segments go to YouTube.
Right.
And so you may not even see them. I saw Stephen Colbert, I think, interview. Who's the guy last week, today, tonight, last and whatever. And he was the HBO. John Oliver there. Thank you. And that was like a 3 or 4 segment interview. And I don't think all of that made it to TV.
Yeah.
He's in Lion King. And so he's been doing a bunch of interviews around, but I think more and more of them are doing it that way, where, which I did this for a while. I didn't find it terribly successful. I don't think I promoted it right, but I did what I called home tech tips, where it was a segment. It was a 5-minute segment I pulled out of the show that was something helpful, that was quick. I was trying to catch that quick audience to do those things, and just ended up being more work than I thought it was worth. But same idea, have a version that's short of something that you're doing, and then offer more for those folks who want more. Why couldn't you do that?
Yeah, that's it. And I'm just now
same material.
About, I think it's 8 months since I launched Your Podcast Consultant, which is small lessons with big value. It's always 9 minutes or less. Why 9 minutes? Because that's how long it takes Jimmy Fallon to get to a commercial. And I figure that must be the attention span of America, which I know it's much less, and it's usually 5 minutes. It's usually just me doing one topic. And I finally now have somebody who reached out and wrote a review and said, I love this show. And I'm like, all right, it took nine months. Another thing I think we need to have kind of patience with. I have a client that just signed up for the School of Podcasting who met me at NAB. And I Googled my calendar, and NAB was back in April.
Yeah.
So May, June, there's 3 months it took for them to finally make a decision. So, and there was, I'm working on more podcast money, and there was, I forget the podcast, but they were interviewing, or they had LegalZoom as a sponsor. and they did like a month, and they went, nah, we're not going to do anymore. We're going to pull out because we're not seeing much traffic from advertising on your shows. And then 2 months later, they called back and said, we want to re-up because now that people are consuming this, we're starting to get traction. So it's not always going to happen overnight. But I thought that was kind of an interesting tidbit. I put another link in the chat room. This is to an interesting article by Tom Webster from that they do all the share of ear Edison research.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this one line. He says, no one has a right to an audience. Though your cause may be just and your hearts be pure, you don't get handed an audience. Not one single pair of eyeballs, or in this case, earbuds. And I just love that line because I'm starting to see so many people like, well, I've been doing this 2 years, so, it's time to make money. And I'm like, okay.
Well, I think what I'm hearing more is I've been doing this 2 years. Where's my audience?
Yeah.
That's to that point. It's like, hey, what this was supposed to happen. Like, what am I, where are they? Why don't I? And you kind of go, well, what are you doing? And by the way, you might be interesting. You might have great content. It just may not have hit the right
promoting
spots.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you may not have gotten into the right places, or the niche may be too tight, or there's so many things that can YouTube is a great example of this. I watch some stupid videos on YouTube that have millions of views, and you're like, this is dumb. Like, what? Then I'm like, oh crap, I'm watching them. Well, maybe they're not as dumb. Maybe
as you look down, you're like, wow, I'm 70% through this really dumb video.
Dave, before we go,
yeah,
two really important things just to talk about. Make sure this gets in the recorded version.
Yeah.
One, Hangouts die this week. So if you're using Hangouts, August 1st is what they've said. So Bangs mentioned that in the chat room, and so thanks for doing that. August 1st is, in theory, when the average, or when the population uses the ability to use Hangouts directly to YouTube, jump on StreamYard. That's probably the easiest way, I think, to go to YouTube. And then,
by the way, schoolofpodcasting.com/StreamYard will get you, I think, a discount if you want to go with the paid version.
Yeah. And you get a lot out of that too. And then 2 categories are the big topic. I can't believe we didn't lead with that, because all the categories now, Apple categories are changing, and all the various providers, Libsyn and Blueberry and Spreaker, have all been notifying their customers saying, hey, we're ready for the new categories. They're not official yet, but you can go into your CMSs and start changing or making sure that what the old is, here's what it's being auto mapped to. And if you want to change it, now is the time, because we can change it now, and then when everything goes live, it'll be there. So you might want to check with your host provider to see if they're ready for that. By the way, SoundCloud is not, and Anchor probably isn't either. And I just made that part up. Don't get Dave riled up. Don't do it. Sorry, I mentioned both of them in the same sentence. Check on your categories. I don't think it's such a big deal, but it is one of those for completists and folks who like all that stuff that's coming up. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that in the post show.
Yeah, I did want to hit this. Dan put a comment here. We're talking about length of shows. He says the company I work for had an academic study commissioned, and they determined when online content is educational, people start to lose their attention after 7 to 10 minutes. Yep, depending on, unless there's
I don't know. I watch a lot of long form content that goes way longer than 7 minutes.
I do know this. When I watch YouTube stuff, I have no problem. But the minute I start watching tutorials on software, which in theory is going to make my life better, I just start nodding off. I don't know why that is. It's just maybe because nobody's going to get hit in the nuts. I don't know. But
well, I find when people are teaching, like when it's like do this and then do that and do this, and the more pro it is, the less interesting it becomes. Yeah. When I watch people do things and they teach me things through actually creating things, and they show their mistakes and they show real world examples and they show what it could really be like, that is interesting. And so I'm much more inclined to, I'll watch a 25 or 30 minute YouTube video. I did this morning before the show. This guy's doing this. He's building he's building a house, and he was doing some drywall, and I was just kind of watching him. He documents all his drywall stuff, and I was kind of like, okay, I wouldn't do it that way, but that's interesting. And okay, that's, I never would have thought of that. I'm learning from him by watching him do it. So I find that to be much more interesting.
Well, keep in mind, if it's just the facts, then people would be reading encyclopedias all the time, and they're not because those are kind of boring. So, but Jim, what's coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
Yeah, we had Edward Weniger back on the show. He's our cryptocurrency and blockchain expert. We do that about once a year just to kind of get the reset on what's going on in that world, and it's always pretty interesting. It's been posted early out at theaverageguy.tv.
Does that get a lot of? I can see one of those. That's almost like one of those topics where you're gonna have people like, "Oh, it's a waste of time. What is that?" And then other people are like, "I'm gonna be a millionaire in 2 years. Shut up."
Yeah, we don't have too many of that, but I do have in my audience. I have audience members super faithful, been listening to me for 7 years. Say, I don't listen to your crypto stuff. Like they're just flat out not interested, and I'm telling you that. And you're like, okay, I'm still gonna keep talking about it, but you can ignore it if you want. That's fine. Yeah. So yeah, I do get some of that.
On the School of Podcasting, I did a monthly survey of my audience. And what I'm trying to figure out is how am I going to take that and turn it into an audience and turn it into an episode, because that could be really boring. Like, let's listen to Dave talk about what you think about Dave. So that's going to be part of this week's episode. How much of it, I'm not sure. But if there's a couple other things I got going on, like I said, I got the Kristen Meisner coming up here in the future. So tune in and find out what Dave figured out he was going to do. So stick around for some post show. And we're back.
Do you ever get any pushback from people with when I talk about cigars? You use that example in the show the other week. You ever get any negative feedback on that?
The only feedback I got on that is, Dave, are you asking for permission? And I said, well, Jim obviously knew. Yeah. I go, Jen, I sent her an email that basically was, I'm using this and you should tell me that I'm not. And I know Jen, and she's going to be thrilled that I mentioned her podcast. And then Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak, their whole thing is do whatever you want to promote the show in any way they're like, do it. If it helps the show, do it. You don't need our opinion. So
no, I was more thinking along the lines of health, not permission lines.
No,
but like, because it's not the
smoking.
healthiest.
Yeah.
It's not the healthiest habit. And in America, we have such an anti-smoking mentality of it. You know, we have spent 30 years trying to eradicate cigarettes. They've only gotten more popular. And I have gotten some negative pushback as I've talked about it on my own show. Folks like, that's not really healthy, and that causes cancer. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. All those things are right. Yeah. So I was just kind of wondering, if you've gotten any negative.
I just love that they're now the Juul thing. They're now, before they play Juul, they're like, this content, contains nicotine that has been found to be addictive. And then they go into Juul, and it's like the whole, this electronic
vaping.
The vaping thing.
Yeah,
and I'm like, do people not realize that just because it's not a cigarette, I'm like, you're still addicted to nicotine. I'm like, you're addicted. You're like, yes.
Yeah.
You get to puff cherry smoke, but you're like, really?
Yeah.
And that's why they're not allowed to promote those two.
Well, I'm just wondering. That's not from I don't want to get into a right or wrong or whatever kind of discussion about.
No,
that.
I just didn't get any feedback.
You choose your own way. You be as healthy as you need to be. All those kinds of things. But I just kind of wondered. That's one of those things where you might have a guest on, and they may have a controversial or an unhealthy or some of those kinds of things, and you kind of wonder. It made me wonder if anybody'd said anything after I listened to it. I was like, I wonder if cigars was a good example. I've gotten sent plenty of other things. Right. Just again, not right or wrong. Just wondering.
Yeah. No. And what was interesting? Let me think about that episode. Was there are more ways to count success besides downloading dollars. That was The one before was trying to answer the question, it depends. It was like people go, should I do this? It depends. And that was one I actually was, if I had more time, I would have re-recorded that episode like the next week, because it just wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. And what's interesting is I was like, just in my mouth, I was just like, oh, not my best. It was a little all over the place, little flighty. And then I look out and there's a comment, Dave, I really needed this episode. I've been ready to start a podcast and this really helped me. And I'm like, there you go. You kind of go, yeah, that was crap. And then somebody goes, I love this episode. So you never know, what you're going to get.
Do you have your lights on?
I do not. The sun just
okay.
went behind a cloud. And I'm like, hold on a second. I'm like, there we go.
It's like, it got dark in there all of a sudden.
All of a sudden it was like the clouds.
It is why I like, I'm in a basement here. I am literally podcasting out of my basement.
Nice.
And I am the stereotype, white, male, 50.
Well, not quite, because you're not in your mom's basement.
That's true. That's true. You're right. So I'm one off. I'm one off from it, but it does help me control the light so much better when there really is no external light coming in. At Gallup, I've moved the studio into an interior office that they put up curtains, big, thick curtains for me, which was super helpful. Yeah. And then I can light it. To make it match and it's got fluorescent overheads, which I prefer to not have, but they're positioned okay. So it makes sense now. I mean, it works for me. But I also have lights like this in there as well, but dark rooms help with that. That way when the sun goes behind, you're not beholden to the sun, so to speak.
Have we ever talked? I think we have. This is one of those things that I talk about it so much that I never realize if I've talked about it on a certain show or not.
No, totally.
Have we ever done the monthly stats or crap? Like a deep dive into that? Okay.
We talked about what we do, roughly what each show downloads and some of those kinds of things.
Now, this is going to be fun because I have no idea what I'm going to get. I'm going to do this live because I had 3 people this week freaking out because their monthly totals were down. And I'm like, that's not really the best way to count your success. First of all, let me log in so I don't have to show you my password. And I'll just use, did you see where LastPass changed their interface?
No.
Yeah, there's an update.
The web interface?
Well, the
web interface.
The web interface, yes. When I click in now, and I just realized I have 80 million logins to Libsyn because of clients and stuff, I get this giant list. Okay, so all right, we will use there we go. We use the Logical Weight Loss Podcast. So I have no idea what I'm going to get here. So if I go to my stats and we go down to monthly, I can see, wow, that it looks like I'm doing crappy. Well, it's because I'm not putting out as many episodes. You know what? Let's use the School of Podcasting. Let's do something that's consistent. Because the Logic Weight Loss Podcast is not consistent.
You could use this show.
That's true. Let's do that.
Yeah, since we have people watching.
All right, so I think we're getting like 400 to 500 downloads an episode now, something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty great.
There we go, 5 to 8. Cool. All right, so if I look at our monthly stats, wow, way all over the place. So if I see April and then I see May, I'm like ready to jump off a bridge. Did I go someplace in May or something like that? But let's look at July. Let's look at June. Let's look at the last month. 5,602 downloads. Now
June had more Saturdays.
June had what?
More Saturdays than May.
Oh, did it? Okay. So if I now go to my episode, so we're not going to count Spotify stats because we probably get 0.3 of our downloads on Spotify, at least for us. So if I look at June.
Yeah, June has 5 Saturdays and May had 4.
There we go. So this will still work. So here we had 802 plus 724 plus 742. This is more than I thought. 855. And that's the last one. Okay, so 3,123 downloads of June of the episodes released in June. 3,123 were of the so. Well, you said wait a minute. We said we had 5,602 downloads in June, and we said we had 3,123 of the episodes released in June. That means that 2,479 episodes are not from June. It's our back catalog. And if we take that and divide it by our total 5,602, that means that 44% of our, if my math is right, 44% of our downloads in a month come from episodes that are not current month. And so what I've been doing is we're here in our current episode. So let's compare what we've done so far this year. So I'm going to look at this one from January 3rd. Wait, let's not use that. because that has 6 downloads. I need to look at that. What are you doing? All right, let's go January 5th. All right, so if I go here, this was released on January 5th. And if I change my calendar here and go to January 1st and rerun this, I can see, he said hitting the run button. Yep, sure enough, first date here is January 5th. So I'm going to go, yep, this was definitely released on the 5th. And I'm going to say, I want to see what it did in a week. Why? Because the week is where that's your diehard subscribers. Those are your okay. So we had 806 people at the beginning of the year. Now this could again blow up in my face talking about that earlier. I have no idea what we're going to get. So we had 800. That's pretty cool in the first week. Nice.
Yeah,
all right.
nice.
So now let's go back to what
thanks,
we're doing.
friends.
Yeah. So now if I go to, let's take June. Let's see if I go to the 6th. Yeah, that's been a week. We'll go last week. The Power of Swag, 669 downloads so far. It was released on the 13th. I'm just going to double check that. Yep. And so if I look at July 13th and say we want to know from that to the 20th, that had 6. So we actually went down. That's not good.
Well,
now here's why.
Yeah.
I can tell you why. January, everybody and their brother is starting a podcast.
Yeah.
That's it. Now let's compare that to, let's go back mid-year. Let's go something that's not January. So if I sort this again to, let's go like March. So March, so 986 released on the 16th.
Well, we get some SEO pickup too, which
that's true.
Yeah.
But this is how I
will, title.
Yeah, that's also very true. And sometimes this podcast is insane trying to come up with a title for it because we have 37. Yeah, this was 697. So there you go. So maybe that one in July just was not doing well. But that's a way that I track.
It's very possible.
I go in because I know when I looked at some of my other shows from like months ago to now, most of them have gone up. So maybe I just picked the wrong episode. No,
I think it could be a wane. You know, we have a wane in listeners. Like it's just, we could be seeing a decrease based on content, and there's other podcasts about podcasting, and it's summer and people are busy, and I mean it's very, very possible. I don't ever like.
Wait, here's the weird question. Oh, wait a minute. Am I in the right spot? Okay, here's show. Here's episodes. There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, because I was like, wait a minute, I couldn't find my July stuff. So, but yeah, you can see we've got up over 1,000. So here, launching an interview-based show. This is where titles really come into play.
It really is. It really does make a difference.
Show notes. So depending on,
does that include click plays from the site or your player? Or okay.
Yeah. In fact, if I actually, let's see if I do on some. I will go down here, and yeah, you can see here we had. 5.
This is why you drive yourself crazy. You can drive yourself crazy with this because you're like, why would our March episodes be more than our June or July or whatever? Yeah. And you can justify it with vacations and summer, but it's not summer down south. And and at the end of the day, Dave, I think averages are more important here than single episodes.
Yeah.
And kind of look at it and saying, okay, where are we generally on average? And it never fails. You always look at it when you're in a down. You never look at it and everything's up. Like that never happens when you're actually looking at it.
The key I want to point out there is 44% of your downloads come from, well, here, let me just show one other quick thing here. And what you can see and why this, it's a fun little thing you could do in Libsyn. So if I go back to my show stats and come down to the daily, and I'm like, the 17th. Now, if that's not a Saturday, I might go, what's going on? But if I double click this little ball, I can get a breakdown of what all these are. So I can see that this was probably the episode that went out here in June, but we've got things here from January, February, December. These are people that have found somebody in this 389 found it and went and downloaded a bunch of back catalog.
Yeah, your back catalog is super important.
Yeah, so that's when people get hung up on monthly stats or daily stats. I had somebody this week, my daily stats are down. I go, your daily stats have kind of nothing to do with your current episode, and it may be a case that it's like you said, maybe your podcast is seasonal. Maybe that episode didn't resonate with people and they're not going to go download your back catalog because that last one was like, that audio was pretty horrible. I don't want any more of that because they think what you're hearing now is what you've heard in the past or things like that.
Right.
You never
Right.
know. And
Right.
at the end of the day, it kind of reminds me of when I was a teacher. I used to have the students fill out an evaluation form at the end of the class. And I had one friend of mine that would literally wet his pants waiting for the reviews to come in. And I'm like, well, why? And he goes, well, if it's a bad review, isn't our boss going to see it? And I go, probably. And I go, but is there anything you would do differently in the classroom? And he goes, well, no, I did, I did what I did with the students we had. I go, that's all you can ask, buddy. I go, so that's, but I just want to point that out because a lot of people get hung up on daily and monthly stats. And the thing you want to look at is episode stats. And that's, for me, I have actually my own spreadsheet where I do a quick grab at the first week and a grab after the first month just to see and just to compare, and because I'm a stat junkie. But I only do that when I upload the latest episode. I look at my stats once a week. And that's it. So
even at work, I don't spend a lot of time looking at stats. And the other day I looked at our YouTube subscriber count. It was like 22,000. And I'm like, when did that happen? Like last time I looked, it was 10. Like where did all these people come from? And it's kind of nice. That's kind of a nice surprise when I haven't been promoting, I have not been promoting subscribing on YouTube, and it's grown, and now we're promoting it, and I think it'll grow even more.
Do you have the thing where you have the little subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner all through your whole video? I forget how Uncle Google told me to do it, but I was able to do it. And I swear I get a subscriber one a day. And I'm like, I think I'm over 1,000 now, which again, compared to, the almighty Gallup, I mean, but
we have tens of thousands of customers.
Yeah. But it's still one of those things where it's like, oh, all right, well, that's growing. Cause I always wonder, like, how does somebody get to 10,000 downloads or 10,000 subscribers or 100,000 download or subscribers and things like that? And the answer is one at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or be interesting, Yeah. One of those, again, this video that I was watching this morning of this guy hanging drywall, right? It's just a guy. He does a lot of, speed work, that goes, he does time, what do they call it? Time lapse.
Yeah.
And not particularly great audio production. He has 137,000 subscribers. And you're like, wow, okay. Well, that's because I think he's being genuine and open and honest, and it's interesting. People like to, same reason a lot of you guys that are listening right now show up on Saturdays. There's something, you find it interesting in some way. I don't know why, but you do find it interesting in some way. And you're coming out on Saturdays, whether you've got it on in the background or you're listening intently, or you're talking to us in the chat room. It's doing something for you, and you continue to show up.
Yeah, just for giggles, and then I'll quit playing with stats. I went and looked at the School of Podcasting stats. So here's January again, because everybody and their brother is starting a podcast in January, and then February just took a nosedive. So if I look at that, I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? And then it's kind of up, and then it's down, and then it's up, and then it's down, and then it's up. Like June took a big old dip for me. But here's the thing. I also got some decent. I have my mentor package, which is really cool. That's where I work with somebody for 3 months. And that's not cheap. And so I got quite a few of those in June, so it's not always again about the downloads. And again, the monthly stats, if I looked at those, it could just be that nobody was downloading my back catalog that month. So I just say this to stop people from jumping off the ledge. It's because it's really easy to see those and go, oh, that's it. My audience has left me. And I'm like, no. That's kind of what inspired. Because when I started looking at that, that's what inspired last week's episode about you can count success by other things than good old fashioned downloads.
Yeah. So, well, they're important though. I mean,
yeah.
If you're getting zero,
zero's not good. And if you do see, it's so weird too, because you can go into like Google Analytics. I had a friend that was getting a boatload of plays of one episode. Like he got featured on a blog, and it was like, this is a really good podcast. You could listen to it. And he could see in Google Analytics that this website was referring people to him. So he knew exactly where the traffic was coming, which is really rare. Usually you have no clue. And for whatever reason, that blog changed or went offline or whatever. And all of a sudden, the blog giveth and the blog taketh away, and that's where it's like, ugh, but it's handy when it's there, and you hope some of those people stuck around. But he saw where all of a sudden, because it was like thousands of downloads a week were coming from this blog post, and all of a sudden it just went boop, and he goes, now it didn't go as down as far as it did before the blog post. He goes, so I gained some audience. He goes, but in the end, it wasn't. He goes, it definitely wasn't the same as when that guy was. He was getting traffic every week from that. We did have that one weird question. We didn't talk about this on the show. This is from Annabelle in a Facebook group. I need some advice. I interviewed someone from an episode with a particular organization. I just sent them an email, and the auto reply states they are no longer working there. I was planning on posting this on Friday. Do I proceed? There's nothing negative about the interview, but I haven't run into this before. Any encounter with this? How would you proceed?
I'd check. No doubt. I would delay the episode and I would check, because that departure could be not good. And then you're going to get a takedown from that company may come back and say, they don't really represent us anymore. You need to take that down. I would double check for sure.
Well, David Hooper interviewed some guy in the music industry, or I forget where he was. He interviewed somebody, and he later turned out to be, he was a pedophile. And, Dave's like, we weren't talking about pedophilia on the podcast. He goes, no. But you don't really want to be associated with that guy. I think it was something really gross like that. And so Dave pulled it. He was like, yeah, we're just going to.
Yeah. I interviewed a high profile tech guy and who got caught up in the Me Too thing. And I had somebody contact me from the company he had worked for and said, you need to pull all those down. And, not all of those, it was just one, but you need to pull that one down. And actually it was nicer. They were like, you should consider pulling that one down. Yeah. I strongly consider. It wasn't a cease and desist or a takedown request, but they did. I did.
Yeah.
It was.
Have you ever used? Wow, are A's now evil? Oaken audio to record. This is the first I've ever heard of it. The one thing that's kind of weird about story, whatever this thing is, StreamYard, is I can't highlight anything in the chat room. Like if I wanted to double click on Ocean Audio to copy it, I can't, because it just says, do you want to hide or show it?
No, not in the browser. You got to I always have a second copy of it open.
Oh, the actual chat room?
Yeah. In both Gallup and with my own YouTube account, I actually have a recording YouTube channel. So a channel just dedicated to the recording bit, the live bit. I kind of advertise that as, hey, here's my live channel. And then I have a recorded channel, completely separate. They're under the same account, but they're completely separate channels. That way I kind of separate them out. That way, when I go live, there can be a notification. And when I post the edited edition, there can be a notification. But in StreamYard, then when I'm going live, that it says, in this case, it says the averageguy.tv live channel or something like that, or what Gallup Webcast Live. Well, I don't want to answer questions in the chat room from that account. So I bring up a separate window with my own, and I log in with my own Google account. That way I have that up, and you can have those two both up separately on a single PC to make it work. But I always have a separate chat room open just for those purposes. And you can search from that one.
Yeah, when I go to their web,
super nerdy. Sorry,
that's you get your nerd on. And for anybody listening to the audio recording and wonder why Jim started walking over himself, it's because Dave opened the YouTube video, and of course it started playing. And all of a sudden, I was like, "Wait, why is Jim talking over Jim?" I'm like, "Oh yes,
they probably didn't hear that because you're not streaming your PC sound into."
Yeah, the video is fine. The audio is going to be like, "Wait, what was that?" Actually, no, I can't, because you're both on the same channel. But easy, fast, and powerful audio editor, free download. Have not used this. It looks is it looks like it's only on Mac, maybe. I know the
nope. They got their version 3.7.2, and then it says free download for Windows 7.
See that? I was going to say the website looks a little dated. So the guy who has a website that looks really
maybe
copyright 2015 at the bottom.
Maybe they just haven't updated the, Maybe, hey, I use a video editor that was built in 2011. So,
I like the features, cross-platform support. That's cool.
Cool. If it works. If it works.
I installed Reaper. That's about as far as I got because I've heard a lot of people talk about it. But there's 8 billion ways to record all those fun-filled things. So, I always say whatever works for you. So, but that's a new one. So, Stacy asked in a Facebook group, does anyone have any good tips on how to reduce echo in Audition? Yes, it's called Deverb. It's not great. It's better than nothing. And much like any kind of noise reduction, if you add a little too much, it makes things sound very, very wonky. I had somebody, I think I talked about it on this show, that I was interviewing. She was in an RV in the middle of the desert. And she had her air conditioning on.
Yeah.
And I tried to clean it up, but my audience was like, no, and I went back and listened to it. That's one of those things that I need to do more of this. I need to edit on like Wednesday and publish on like the weekend or something like that, or Monday. I need some days apart to come back and listen to it with fresh ears, because at the time I thought, oh, this sounds so much better than it did, which it did, but it still sounded pretty crappy. And I think if I had walked away for a little bit and then came back, I would have said, hey, this needs some bass in it. It still kind of sounds like she's underwater. It was like a really bad Skype connection is what it sounded like. And I was like, yeah, not the best there.
Bangs is clarifying on this audio editor. So they've just dropped 3.7 just dropped last month. They're in it says Windows 7 or higher. So they're trying to say, hey, you can use this instead of, most people say, Windows 10, Windows 7, Windows, they kind of do the 8.1 on it. They're just doing it differently. So that's cool.
Well, the nice thing about it is it records, he says ASIO devices, which means in theory, I could plug a mix pre into that and have separate channels.
Yeah.
Where I don't think you can do that in Audacity. I think that's one of the weird things I've run into.
How does this be out there so long and it's never come across either one of our radars? That's pretty weird.
I saw
not that we're the be all end all, but it's just we come across a lot of stuff.
I saw the ad that when I typed in their name, there was an ad that's like, how does this software compare to NCH? And I've heard of NCH, whatever their software is, because I can run into that. So, and Daniel says Audacity can record multi-track.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and try that again. So, but Bang says GPO forbids it. Oh, they release legacy OS versions. So, and then the general.
Oh yeah. If they just come up with, if they're maintaining this thing, it's probably fine. It's just one of those kinds of things. I've seen some tools where they've just the developers have abandoned them. Everybody still likes them; they work great, but they're not getting any updates.
Yeah.
So.
We have somebody here from Detroit. Speaking of old sites, cut a show once using an old Mac G4 tower in a pinch when the laptop was in the shop. Did it work and spit out the MP3? Yes. That's the cool thing about audio. You don't really need, a giant thing. Speaking of that, we did have a question I saw out there, and I see this a lot. How long does it take you to edit your podcast? I guess it depends on which one, but Jim, how long does it take you to do?
Well, Home Gadget Geeks is a 3 hour, maybe 4. Well, just the edit.
Yeah, I guess. I guess that's the question. They're kind of like, it seems like most people are like, okay, you just recorded an hour-long interview.
Yeah, I'm a bad guy to ask because I'm live, so I do very few edits. Half an hour probably worth of work to slice some things out, add some music in. We actually, real funny thing, we were doing a live theme Thursday for Gallup, and it has music in it, but I don't do my music live. I always thought it was crazy you did, and I like that you do our music here live because I think it adds to the show. But I don't do the music in the live recordings of anything else that I do. And somebody in the chat room who'd been there, this is their first live show they come to. They're like, "Hey, wait, where's the music?" Like, what, and they were just so used to hearing the show done with the music, realizing we pasted that stuff in kind of after the fact. But yeah, I've got a few things that I add in, so maybe half an hour.
Yeah, I think I usually go like half of whatever so if it's an hour long file, it's going to take me somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. So, best would be 20, typically 30, kind of depends. And it also depends on what you're editing. Like some people are just machines and other people are not. And then like I just I interviewed this guy, Dr. Schuster. He does the Daily Helping. Had a bunch of, because of my podcast stories. So I'm like, let's just have you come on. And I kind of I didn't get to do a ton of research on him. And so we kind of did a pre-interview. I said, okay, this is where we're going to go. But in the end, I'm going to take ownership on this. I told him who he's talking to, but at one point he went way in the weeds because he's a brain dude. He's a brain doctor. And he just went way into the brain stuff. And I was like, as I'm listening to it, like, yep, this is never going to make the light of day, and that's just one that, and that's fine, so, but most of the time, if I have, like the one with, I keep bringing her up, but the one with Kristen, I read her book. I did tons of research. I knew exactly I knew the answers before I asked the question. And there was only one. And that's, again, I take ownership. I asked a question very open-ended because I wanted her to talk about how she started this podcast and it didn't work. And the way I asked it, she went in a completely different, like, I asked, it was about the podcast, but it wasn't. And as she's doing the answer, I'm like, yeah, that's on me. I asked that one wrong. And, that will not make the light of day. So, and what I'm going to do with the brain guy, this is whenever I do this will probably be in a month. The stuff he talks about is interesting. It's actually he's kind of trying to create a competitor to Gallup. His website, I just threw away. Something powers, but it's a psychological evaluation. So instead of DISC, it's about, I forget what he said, how you interact with people, and it's much more brainy-ish than. And he explained what DISC is, and I asked him, I go, well, how's this different than the other stuff? And that was the question I shouldn't have asked, because he went, wow.
Yeah.
And I was like, interesting, but.
It's still a good question. It's a very valid question.
Because it's interesting. There's part of it that I'm going to use. And then he went deep dive. And I'm going to try this. I'm going to put the deep dive as a file for download only on Libsyn. I'm going to put it in the show notes. And I'm going to use it. I'm like, hey, if you want to go deep dive into the brain stuff, I've got a file on the website. You can just go out there. You can download it. You can listen to it and play it and see how much of my audience was interested in, quote, the brain stuff.
Yeah.
So
I think you'll find very few will actually do it. Yeah.
When I was listening, I was like, because he loved it because he's a brain guy.
Yeah.
But I was
right on. Just most people don't really want details. They're really listening to be entertained or to be confirmed on something they already think about. Right. That's a lot of people, that it's an entertainment thing. It's to keep me busy thing. If you had included it in there in the podcast, they would have listened to it, but it would have gone secondary. It would have quickly gone into the secondary part of their brain where they're like, I'm never going to remember this stuff. So
we're having a big debate in the chat room.
It's around that it's an Audacity.
Read ASIO in Windows or not.
Audio nerds, Dave. They're just audio nerds. This is the brain surge, or this is the brain stuff of audio going on right here, happening in the chat room right now. More nerdery than most people could take or handle in a sitting in a session. 99.9% of podcasters would have no idea what any of this stuff is. Oh, yeah, I shouldn't. Okay, hold on. Let me back up. I don't mean to make podcasters sound that way, but most of them would not know. They're like, I just need to click play and make a few edits. I don't. That's
it. Yeah. Well, you can go way too far the other way when you get into editing. Because when I hear somebody say, I spent 3 hours editing a 20-minute interview, I'm like, there's something going on there. Either A, the audio was horrendous.
Yeah.
Or I'm like, it shouldn't take you, 6 times as long to edit the interview.
Or they're not good at it,
Yeah.
They're just not good at it. There's tricks.
That's where I find
shortcuts
they're editing out the every breath and things like that. And I didn't mention it, but somewhere in the future I will be talking about this. I bought a new toy.
Your gimlet?
Yes, my Kindle. So that I would be hopefully playing with that. My goal is to take this with me today if I go bike riding and shoot some video on the phone. The other thing I need to avoid, and then we'll get out of here.
Will it clamp onto your bike, or you're not going to hold
No, I
it?
would have to hold it and
Oh
ride.
boy!
I almost got hit by a deer on a bike. The other night I was talking about riding in the dark, and I'm seriously like 4 feet from 3 deers. And luckily when they scampered away from me and not in front of me, but it scared the bejesus out of me. I also need to stay away from the Verizon store because the Verizon stores let me know that my phone is now available for an upgrade. And I could go get a new iPhone, whatever, XS, XR, Max, blah, blah, blah. So, but at any rate, why you answer the same Audacity only records 2 mics and equals,
Yeah, it's the Windows. The Windows version of Audacity doesn't have the right drivers to be able to do the multiple inputs with microphones. And
do we know who Bangs is? Do we like any clue?
He works for, doesn't he work for one of the?
I don't know.
Doesn't he work for one of
He
the?
seems to have a vast knowledge of everything. Like, I'm always glad he's in the chat room.
It's helpful.
So, yeah,
it's certainly helpful. So hopefully he has a podcast around the intricacies of audio things and is recording how to help people do that. Hopefully that's what he's doing.
There you go.
I guess we should know. Maybe we should know our audience better. Bangs, if you don't have a podcast, you're probably doing those kinds of things. You probably should.
Well, I know he's the king of Reddit. That's where I know.
Oh yeah, the fun Reddit.
He's the king of Reddit.
The fun Reddit space, because all kinds of constructive conversations go on in Reddit. It's one of the most encouraging places. Like when I'm feeling down, I just go to Reddit and I just read. Bangs, we're not. He says no, he's not the Reddit guy, but yeah, Reddit's such an encouraging place to be. It just is so helpful. I
pop in there once a week. I should probably publish some of my articles over there. It seems like they might get some traction. I don't know.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe so. All right, have a good afternoon,
guys.
Dave.
Yep.
Good,
have a good
hanging
weekend
out with you guys. We'll see you
y'all
guys next week.
See y'all next week, and hopefully, Hangouts will work without,
Oh no, I think this will be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. We'll
find out.
No, this should be fine.
If it doesn't, I'll set up another thing to go Facebook public, and we'll end up on Facebook, or but that'll be.
I have a show Thursday, so I will know.
You'll be the first one into the pool.
Pretty quick. I will know pretty quick if it's going to work or not. I've got a show Thursday morning, so.
Got it. All right, man.
All right, see ya.
Have a good one. Thank you, chat room.